San Diegans accomplish great things every day. We care about our neighbors and our community. We are proud of our diversity. We are resilient. We hold our leaders accountable. We live in one of the most dynamic cities in America, the San Diego Union-Tribune, telling San Diego's story for more than 150 years.
Hi, I'm Noelle Norton, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of San Diego.
And I'm Brian Clack, A. Vasiliadis, Director of USD's Humanities Center.
The College and Humanities Center at USD are proud to partner with the San Diego Union-Tribune for the 2020 Festival of Books.
USD is committed to lifelong learning, and we are delighted to join you avid readers, lovers of ideas, books, and stories for today's programming.
We hope you enjoy the presentation.
Hi, my name is Deborah Paredez, and I am the author of the recently released volume of poetry, Year of the Dog, published in April 2020 by Boa Editions. And today I'll be reading a few selections from the book and also sharing with you some images that are also part of the book. I wrote Year of the Dog in most of it in 2018, another Year of the Dog in the lunar calendar. But the Year of the Dog that the book refers to is actually the year 1970, the year of my birth, the year of my father's deployment or readying for deployment for the Vietnam War, along with many other Mexican-American and Mexican immigrant soldiers. And also, for me, the Year of the Dog also references the story of Hecuba, the figure in Greek myth who was the queen of Troy and was so outraged and full of grief over the horrors of war that she committed herself so fully to grieving and wailing out that she cried and cried and howled and howled until she was transformed literally into a dog. And by transforming into a dog, she was actually able to escape her imminent slavery to the Athenians. And so for me, Hecuba represents in so many ways women's responses to war and disaster. And that's so much of what this book is about. So I'm going to begin reading a poem called Wife's Disaster Manual. And it's actually referencing another mythic figure, that of Lot's wife. And it's a retelling of her story. So little did I know I would be reading my poems in the midst of another disaster. But here we go. Wife's Disaster Manual. When the forsaken city starts to burn, after the men and children have fled, stand still, silent as prey, and slowly turn back. Behold the curse. Stay and mourn the collapsing doorways, the unbroken bread in the forsaken city starting to burn. Don't flinch. Don't join in. Resist the righteous scurry and instead stand still, silent as prey. Slowly turn your thoughts away from escape. The iron gates unlatched, the responsibilities shed. When the forsaken city starts to burn, surrender to your calling. Show concern for those who remain. Come to a dead standstill. Silent as prey, slowly turn into something essential. Learn the names of the fallen. Refuse to run ahead when the forsaken city starts to burn. Stand still and silent. Pray. Return. The book chronicles some of the events, some of them well-known, some of them not so well-known, that took place during the year 1970, one of which was one that I think many of us might remember or at least have heard about, which was the shooting at Kent State. And the book also incorporates a lot of the photography, iconic photography from that era, And it intermixes and kind of deconstructs some of those poems and some of those images and collages them with snapshots my father took while he was deployed in Vietnam. So I'm going to share some poems and some images that kind of interact in the book. This is a piece of a very famous photograph that I reference in this poem called Year of the Dog, Synonyms for Aperture, Kent State University, May 4th, 1970. Marianne Vecchio is down on her knees. Jeffrey Miller's body is face down beside her. John Philo presses his finger down and the aperture shudders. There are 4 down when the shooting stops. Marianne's arms are outstretched, a stripped mast. John is running out of film. Snowy blossoms shroud the dogwoods outside the frame. This girl came up and knelt over the body and let out a god-awful scream, John will say. That made me click the camera. Marianne is a 14-year-old runaway. Later she'll say, I hitchhiked my way into history. And later, it really destroyed my life. There will be a song about 4 dead in Ohio. Oh, hi, oh, I, oh, oh, oh. The bullet enters Jeffrey's opened mouth and comes out the other side. Marianne's mouth is open, an obliterated star. Synonyms for aperture: mouth, gap, cleft, chasm, hole, rupture, perforated passage, eye. In Spanish images of the Pietà, the Virgin often holds out one hand or the other. Marianne will get hate mail. Mary, you dirty tramp, it's too bad it wasn't you that was shot. Or another, you hippie communist bitch, did you enjoy sleeping with all those dope fiends and Negroes when you were in Ohio? Marianne's mother will say, can you imagine her looking at that? I write a number of poems in the book that engage everyday kind of almost banal language. And I thought, what is the most overused language or most familiar language to us? And that's the idiom. And I looked to idioms that used body parts as a way to help us refamiliarize ourselves with the horrors of war and the everyday language that often perpetuates violence. So this one is called Armature. A call to arms. 2 arms akimbo, arms and the gentleman at arm's length, armed to the teeth, arm candy, armed struggle with open arms inspection. Give my right arm, strong arm, bare arms, babe in arms, take up arms, shot in the arms of an angel, up in arms, up, arms up, arms up. Arm in arm, twisting my arm, a farewell to brothers in arms, these arms of one armed bandit with one arm tied behind my back. The long arm of the law costs an arm and a leg. As we saw with Marianne Vecchio and Hecuba and Lot's wife, I recall a number of women who were bearing witness to the disasters of war and violence. And this poem is a poem about a woman named Deborah Johnson, or Akura Njeri, who was the partner of Fred Hampton, who was murdered by Chicago police in December 1969. When he was killed, she was beside him in bed and was at the time 8.5 months pregnant. It's called Lightning. You didn't look down or back. Spent the fractured minutes studying each crease and curve of the lawmen's faces. So later you could tell how it happened, how you crossed over his body, how you kept your hands up, how you didn't reach for anything, not your opened robe, nothing. How they said, he's good and dead. How you crossed over the threshold. How you lifted one and then the other slippered foot across the ice. How you kept yourself from falling. How your bared belly bore the revolver's burrowing snout. How when the baby starts to descend, it's called lightning, though it feels like a weight you cannot bear. Lightning is when you know it won't be long before it's over. These images here are from captions on the backs of the photos my father took that I found. A show of hands. My father taught me never to show my hand, always play the hand you're dealt. Don't bite the hand that feeds you, gotta hand it to him. He lived his life hand to mouth. Even before Nam, he knew close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. Go hand to hand, combat. Idle hands are the devil's, play into the enemy's hand it over and out of his hands. Ringing a bird in hand is worth two in the bush. He wasn't so good with his hands, took his life into his own blood on his hands, on the one hand and on the other. Year of the Dog, Walls and Mirrors, Fall 1982. This poem begins with an epigraph from the designer of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, Maya Lin. She writes, "The wall dematerializes as a form and allows the name to become the object." The English translation of my surname is Walls, misspelled. The original S turned to its mirrored twin, the Z, the beginning of the sound for sleep. I'm nearly 12, and the mirror is a disaster I learn to turn away from. The girl looking back, always looking to extract her pound of flesh. I had a simple impulse to cut into the earth, Maya Lin is writing, as the mirrored wall of names she's made is arranged and laid against the riven hillside. I never looked at the memorial as a wall, she writes, but as an edge to the earth, an opened side. For a wall to become a mirror, it must not absorb or scatter too much light. For a girl to become the protagonist, she must sleep with the guy or until he kisses her awake. Sometimes we know she's the fairest one of all because of the mirror on the wall. Sometimes she must scale the city's walls to bury the guy. Antigone cuts into the earth to give him his proper burial. She ends up the heroine and buried alive, an in-between thing, like someone who's 11 or nearly 12. When I look at the number 11, I see two walls, my name and its mirrored twin. Sometimes 11 resembles the mirrored L's at the end of wall or the beginning of llanto, the Spanish word for weeping. Sometimes 11 looks like a pair of railway sleepers arranged and laid along a track that's always leading me back to my war-worn father. Sometimes the guy comes back from battle and has seizures in his sleep and the girl must shake him awake. Sometimes the wall and the name are one and the same. Sometimes the wall is where we end up to begin letting go our llanto. This next poem is called Self-Portrait with Weeping Women. There's a number of self-portraits in the book, a lot of play with the idea of portraiture and images and the ones we take and the ones we imagine of ourselves. Self-Portrait with Weeping Women. I know why I fell hard for Hecuba. Shins skinned and lips split to blooming lupine on her throat's rough coat, hurl down the whole length of disaster. I'm sure I'd grown to know by then to slacken as a sail against the current and squall of a woman's woe. What could I do but chorus my ruddered howl to hers? When you're a brown girl raised up near the river, there's always a woman bereft and bank-wrecked, bloody and bleeding with her insistent lament. Ah, Llorona. Every crossing is a tomb and a tune, a wolf wail and the moon that turns me to scratch at the tracks of every mud-dirged girl. And I'm going to close with another self-portrait, the last poem, one of the last poems in the book. And it is called Self-Portrait in the Time of Disaster. All morning, my daughter pleading, outside, outside. By noon, I kneel to button her coat, tie the scarf to keep her hood in place. This is her first snow, so she strains against the ritual, spooked silent, then whining, restless under each buffeting layer, uncertain how to settle into this leashing. I manage at last to tunnel her hands into mittens, and she barks and won't stop barking. Her hands suddenly pause. She's reduced to another state, barking all day in these restraints. For days after, she howls into her hands, the only way she knows now to tell me how she wants out. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Deborah Paredez. This is my book, Year of the Dog, and I invite you to read it and to purchase it, please, from one of our indie bookseller communities by accessing the link that you will see at the end of the video. Thanks again, and be well.